This does the same in my part of the world, and welcome from me, Martin Smith, aka Cornish Grandad, to my YouTube channel. I trust you're well and interested in learning the fundamentals of how to use Blender. You may live in a minimalist flat. However, a rustic kitchen, I think, needs lots of detail and lots of clutter. Without clutter, we lose some of that realism. Look again at our scene, the inspiration for our work. Vanessa Bell's The Kitchen at Charleston, East Sussex. We have onions hanging from the ceiling, a cupboard in the corner, a range with shiny saucepans, scales, etc. all over the place. A cluttered scene often looks more realistic than a Spartan scene. Rather than a standard how-to tutorial today, I'm just going to show you some of the little techniques I used, and I'm sure you can think of many more yourself. So we'll get that semi-translucent effect on butter using a butter shader. A quick look at how hair particles can be used to make the bristles for a broom, and we'll draw to a conclusion by drawing back some curtains for our window. So the first hint I'd like to share with you is how to realistically put a material onto butter. Now, subsurface scattering is where some of the light will hit an object, go into the object, and then get reflected by a layer other than the top layer. We tend to think of that as like the webs between our fingers held up against the sunlight, or perhaps the light coming through an ear. But butter's another example of where subsurface scattering is appropriate. I started off by creating a cube, shaped it a bit, beveled the corners, and took a slice of butter off the corner to give us this material. Now this is in Eevee. It looks like a lump of wax at the moment. Let's create a new material. And what I want to do is have a colour in for the base colour and a colour in for the subsurface colour. So we could select a colour, any colour we like, and then copy that into the subsurface colour. But if I then change this to a different colour, then I've got to copy it across, and that's a bit of a pain. So what we could do is we could use an RGB colour wheel to dry both of them. So we could plug that colour wheel into the base colour, colour wheel into the subsurface colour, pick a colour, and if we're happy with that, obviously if not, we can adjust them both. The other key bit is this subsurface value here. That's a subtle effect, so normally a value between 0.1 and 0.2 would suffice, and our roughness needs to come down to something similar. So we're already beginning to see the effect, but this is in Eevee. If we change the cycles and let cycles render, we'll see the full effect. And there we see the final render with our subsurface scattering for our material. So the second hint is how to create a broom with bristles in it. We're going to foray into the particle system to do that. And I've started off in a blank canvas just because I thought it was easier to see what was happening. So let's quickly create a handle from a cylinder. Nothing fancy here. Don't need much detail in it. Okay. And then we're going to create, like in our smoke simulation, we need to create an emitter object, and we're going to use a circle as it represents the diameter of the bristle head. And we're going to fill it. Nothing ain't gone, that do. Okay, right, so let's grab that and slide it down to the end of the head. and we'll just flip it, and I'll explain why in a bit. Rotate X 180. Right, I don't know what I just did then. So with our emitter selected, we go to particle properties, add a new one. It's going to be type hair, and there's your hairs appear at the bottom. Far too many of them, we don't need that many, it'll take too long to work, and we probably need to be, what, 0.4 of a meter long, something like that. There we go, we have some bristles appearing. Now they just appear as straight lines at the moment because we're not in preview mode. We go into render mode, they still look pretty boring, but if we go into cycles, you'll see that they render properly. Okay, if we go back into our particle system, we go into hair shape, we select and change the root diameter to be 2 millimeters and the scale to be 1. It's hard to see, but there we go, we're getting some thickish bristles, and rather than having tips that taper at the end, we could make them more bristle-like by getting rid of that closed tip option there. And there we have our basic bristle shape. So I'm going to go back to site EV just to carry on working on this. And I'm going to go back to solid view. There we go. So we actually want bristles going the other way as well. So the easiest way is if we select that object, we'll right click, we'll duplicate it, we'll rotate that through 180 degrees. So we have bristles going both directions. And now we can hide this area. So if we create another cylinder, we're going to add a cylinder, we'll make it a bit more detailed perhaps. We'll make it bigger than the one we just had, so we'll make it 4.5 centimeters, and we don't want it very big at all, so 100 centimeters. Slide that down. Something wrong there, looks far too big. So we scale it in the Z-axis, SZ. So this is the little band that's going to hold everything in place, basically, GZ. Okay, so that'll hide that. If we now select one of our circles and we go into particle edit mode, you can see I've got my bottom bristle selected. I've got some tools here. The comb one is a good one to start with. We can just kind of tease these out a little bit, rotate it round, tease these out a little bit, rotate it round, just make it look a bit more realistic, a bit more natural. Okay, and then we can go to the cut tool and we can just taper these edges slightly. Perhaps give it a bit more volume. And then if we go back to object mode, we select the other circle, which would be this one, go back into our particle edit. These ones should be a lot shorter, so in cut mode we can make them a lot shorter. Happy with that? Yeah. And if you wanted to taper those a little bit, we could comb those back, comb those into shape as you see fit. I'm just going to tidy mine up a little bit, something like that. And obviously you'll need to colour this, give it some nice texture and stuff, but you have a basic Broom. For my final hint, I'll show you how I use the cloth simulation to create some realistic curtains to cover our windows. And I'm going to do this in a virgin environment just because the simulation will be quicker for the tutorial. So as with our T-tail, we need to create a mesh. I'm going to create mine using a grid, so because we need quite a bit of detail for the mesh to work. I'll create 50 vertices in each direction, making 1.2 meters long, and I want to make it stand upright because curtains don't normally lie down. There we go. So let's create this, turn this into a cloth object. Probably only need 50 frames to work on. Let's play that, and as we'd expect, it falls. So what we're going to do is we're going to pin this top edge here. We could pin the whole edge, but I like that kind of pleated effect, so I'm going to select every fourth vertices so we can create some nice pleats. And what we can do is we can go into this object option here, Object Data Properties. We can create a vertex group, and then we can assign those vertices to that group. Now if we jump to our cloth simulation and come down here to shape, there's an object here, option here, sorry, that says pin. So we can now pin that group. Now if we go back to object mode and play that, you can see it's bouncing slightly, but nothing much has happened because we've pinned that top row. So that's exactly what we wanted to do. So now what we want to do is select these items and scale them in so we can pull our curtain together. So if I do scale on the x-axis, you can see what it's doing. It's actually pulling them in evenly from either direction, and that's not what we want. We want it to slide from here across to here. So we select that first point, do our Shift S, cursor to selected. Then in this option, looks like two links together, the transform pivot option, we have an option here that says 3D cursor. So now if we now reselect our vertex group there, and we do SX, you can now see it's trying to pull it in on the axis, which is exactly what we wanted to do. In here's a thing called shape keys. Now shape keys are a way of saving modifications to an object. They're often used in animation, when you want a simple animation, perhaps lip movement or something like that, or perhaps one ear's waggling or something like that. And we can use that. So the first thing is we need to be in object mode. Now that button, first off, it creates this thing called basis, and that's kind of taking the mesh as it is at the moment. And then we can do another one, which will be how we're modifying this basis. Now I'm going to cover keyframes in more detail next session, so I'd just like you to live with me at the moment. The current value of key 1 is, if I leave this at 0, I have no effect at all on the basis. So make sure your timeline's set at 1, right click on this, insert a keyframe. Go back inside edit mode, select your group, we'll scale this on the x-axis, and on the top left you can see we're scaling down to, I'm going to roughly 40%, it won't matter too much, there we go. And if we then go back into object mode, happy with that, go back into object mode, run our timeline all the way forward to 50, and we'll set this to 100% of our movement, so 1 in this case, and insert keyframe. And if we rewind and play this now, you can see our curtain is beginning to take shape. It's doing what we want it to do, which is good. So let's shade smooth that. We'll add some
subsurface divisions, because that will improve the accuracy. Rewind that. Let's play that again. That's looking pretty good. Go back into our cloth simulator. We might want to up the quality steps to 10. We might want to choose a preset of cotton. That should make it look nice and even. And what we will then do is duplicate this, flip one over, so you've got two curtains, one either side, bake them together, and then play them forward until we get a animation that we love, that looks just right. And then we can apply that and put that onto the wall. You probably want to put a curtain pole up as well, and then put some nice colour on it, a bit of semi-partial transparency, whatever you like. But that's a quick way of making curtains. Hopefully that was useful.
Hope you've enjoyed and learned something from this tutorial. Have fun creating a lot more detail and clutter into your scene, and then we'll finish off our tutorial by rendering our image. If you have been, thanks for watching.